Second thing we can see, though, is the old order. Now, what's interesting about the nation of Israel, and really all nations at that time, is unfortunately, if you read on the story, what you're going to find is the nation of Israel struggled to live out this identity. In fact, as they went about their endeavors, they would constantly go through these ups and downs of following God, serving God, obeying God, and having blessing, to then being taken over and succumb to the nations around them, which were all worshiping idols, right? Every other nation at this time practiced idolatry, idol worship. And what they would do is every god that they had an idol that was attached to it. And these idols were not so different than the things that we love and worship now, right? They had an idol for a god who would give fertility and provide you lots of kids, which in that culture was the sign of strength, the sign of economic prosperity, how many kids you had to work in the fields, work in the farms, right? That was their strength. They had a god that was attached to crops, so how well your crops did or how large your herds grew, which was all finances and economics and social standings, right? So they had gods for everything, and they would worship these idols in the hopes that they would get what they wanted. And so every other nation, every other people other than the nation of Israel was worshiping idols to try to find a sense of identity. The idea here is if I could get this thing, then I would be happy. And Israel comes along and God says, no, I don't want you to operate that way. You have a new order. But constantly, what we find in their story is they constantly reverted from the new order back to the old order and worshiped idols. It's easy, I think, for us to read these stories and go, look at those ancient people. They're so crazy, man, worshiping idols. But the truth is, I don't think you and I are so different. In fact, there's a book, it's called You Can Change by a British pastor. His name's Tim Chester. And in that book, he says, he writes that every human being, every sin can be attached to 4 primary source idols that we worship. And the idea is that each one of these idols is an area that we try to find identity, right? We try to find a sense of value and worth. So one of the things is, if I could have this, I would finally be happy. Or if I don't have this, life isn't worth living. And he lays out 4, and he says, each person, every sin that you commit can be attached to your worship and finding identity in one of these idols. And so I'll lay them out, right? The first is approval. You can see them up on the screen. The approval is the idol. It's the sense that I find my identity in people's approval of me, people's liking me, people's valuing me, people thinking I'm great. My idol, my identity is found in whether or not people approve of me. This is my idol of choice, by the way. Right? So maybe we look to relationships, we look to people, we look to our job, we look to money. We can use all kinds of different things, but the true motivation of our heart is, I'll be happy as long as people think I'm great, as long as people think I'm smart, as long as people think I'm awesome. My idol is approval. And before we go on, it's important to note that our idols will motivate us to do both good behavior and bad behavior. Right? So take, for example, we talked about giving earlier. I could give in the offering plate, which seems like a good behavior, but my motivation is I want to be recognized by the pastors, and I want people to think I'm awesome, right? My approval idol can motivate me to give. But I could also take from the offering plate. I know we don't pass an offering plate anymore. This is old school Christianity. I could take from the offering plate and steal because my motivation is I'm going to take somebody out on a date later and impress them with how much money I have so that they'll approve of me. You see what I'm saying? The same idol. One produces good behavior, quote unquote. One produces bad behavior, right? So that's approval idol. The second one is power. And power is the idea that my identity comes in being positions of power or influence over other people. So we've probably all seen, maybe you have some people at your job or work that you have recognized this in, right? Their whole identity comes in them having authority over others. But we also see this in the church, right? Maybe someone becomes a parking lot attendant or head usher. No offense to any of our ushers or parking lot attendants. I'm sure none of you have power idols. But sometimes, right, there can be even places in church where we can serve when what our heart really loves is having some authority and power over other people. The third one is the idea of control. Another way to put this is security. And Pastor Caleb mentioned the idea of your bank account, right? These are those of us who we feel better and safer when the number in our account is higher. It's the people that you've got everything in your life planned out. You've got your to-do list. You've got your schedule, your strategies, and that's all well and good. But when that doesn't happen the way you want it to and the way you planned out, your life feels chaotic. You feel out of control, right? Your identity comes in your ability to feel safe and secure and in control of all aspects of life. And then the last one is the idol of comfort. And this, by the way, I think is the predominant idol of this next generation. Comfort is the idea that my happiness comes in the ability of avoiding pain or discomfort. And people use things like, of course, drugs and alcohol to numb themselves, pornography, but even things like food, Netflix, even healthy behaviors like exercise can become a way of numbing ourselves and avoiding uncomfortability or pain in our lives. I'll be happy as long as I don't have to feel pain. So Tim Chester says, and I think he's right, that all of our behavior in life, all of our sin is motivated by the worship of one of these idols. I realized this was really evident in my life one time. I was home, it was my day off, and my wife was working, and she was coming home for a lunch break. And it was about 10 minutes before she got home, and I started thinking, I'm going to clean the house up for her. And wives, I don't know if you know this, but when men become husbands, God gives us a secret ability to clean up the house in about 5-10 minutes in a way that maybe looks like it took us 45 minutes, right? Men, you know that's a gift the Lord gives us. And so I'm doing that. I'm running around. I'm doing dishes. I'm fluffing pillows, right? I'm getting all ready. And she's about to come home. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be great. She's going to come in. She's going to be so surprised. And she's going to start thinking how great of a husband I am. Like, she's going to say, oh, you're the best, man. I love you so much. What a selfless person you are. And maybe she'll pull her phone out and start posting on Facebook about me. Like, I don't know, right? I just dreaming. And so I'm thinking about all this. I'm building up my mind. And my wife comes in the door. And I'm like, I'm a kid in candy store. I just can't wait. I'm like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And she comes in and says nothing. Not a word. And then she walks past and she starts heading to the kitchen. I'm like, okay, well, surely when she gets to the kitchen and she sees that the 3 dishes that were in the sink this morning I washed, she'll notice. So I follow her in the kitchen. She doesn't say a word. And I start getting angry at her. I start getting frustrated. And so she's talking to me, and I kind of like snap back at her, and we have a little tiff, not a fight, a little tiff. You know what those are. And she leaves because she has to go back to work. And I'm starting to think to myself, why am I angry at her? And the Holy Spirit speaks to my heart in that moment. He says, you're angry because you didn't do the dishes for her. You did it for yourself. What my heart really wanted in that moment was not to love and serve my wife. What my heart wanted was her approval. I was desperate for her to come in and say, you are so great, you are so awesome. My identity was being found in her approval of me. And when she didn't give it to me, I became angry at her because now she was standing in the way of what my heart really wanted. She was standing in the way of my identity. See, I wasn't selfless at all. What I was doing was I was worshiping an idol. I had lost track of the new order, the gospel order. I'd lost track of my identity being found in the grace of God, and I was looking for my identity and my wife's approval. And it created dysfunction in our relationship, all because I went back to the old order. New order, old order,